Tuesday, June 10th, 2025, 9:30 a.m. As the Los Angeles federal courthouse buzzed with tension, Sean Diddy Combs sat at the defense table, his face polished calm, but inside he was unraveling the racketeering and sex trafficking charges had already begun tearing down his empire, and now something unexpected was about to breach his carefully built world. Terrence Howard, weary but unwavering, took the witness stand. His eyes locked on the cameras. He wasn't there to entertain. He was there to reveal a truth long buried by the industry that once celebrated him. Prosecutor Linda Chen's voice rang out steady and sharp. "Sir Howard, do you possess any information regarding potential victims of Mr. Combs not yet disclosed?" The room went still. Diddy flinched just slightly, panic surfacing, then vanishing behind his trained expression. Howard leaned in. "I do, and I want to speak about Ava Combs." Murmurs spread like static through the courtroom. The name landed like a strike. Ava Combs. Howard's voice dropped but cut deeper. In April 2020, Diddy introduced her as his adopted daughter on Instagram Live, a staged moment during lockdown when the world needed hope. He gave them Ava, a symbol of purity, a fable of light in the dark. Then she disappeared. More photos, no more mentions, no goodbye, just silence. "This isn't abandonment," he said. "This is a pattern, a signal embedded in a dark code. And I urge investigators, look into Ava Combs. Her story is a key that unlocks what's really going on here." All eyes shifted Ava's name, pulling focus like a black hole in the center of Diddy's collapsing image. Spring 2020. While the world locked down the Combs, estate pulsed behind its walls. Music and murmurs flowed, uninterrupted public mandates ignored. Velvet backrooms alive with deals and desire. Diddy sensed the moment he knew what the public wanted. He told one of his assistants, "Get that girl Ava, make sure she looks perfect like a porcelain doll. We're going live." Ava Baron Combs was 11 then. Hair like moonlight eyes, too clear to lie. She was the daughter of a trusted friend of Kim Porter, Diddy's late partner. Since Porter's death in 2018, Ava and her family had been pulled into the orbit of his world, a world shaped by power and image and control. On that day, Ava wore white, her hair done to perfection makeup. Subtle enough to glow on camera, Diddy pulled her close on a custom sofa, smiling like he'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. "What up, fam?" he said, voice booming with synthetic warmth. "In these wild times, I want to introduce you to a light in my life. This is Ava Baron Combs, my adopted daughter. The Combs family just got bigger. Y'all." The live stream comments rolled in. Love, praise hearts, and prayer hands. People believed it because they needed to believe it. Ava showed up in a few more posts, a few more family portraits, then nothing. She vanished from public view as quickly as she appeared, and now in this courtroom her name returned louder than ever, and the silence that followed her disappearance finally demanded to be heard. Through mid-2020, Diddy's social media grid became a carefully managed illusion. Every post deliberate, each image curated to project the role of the doting father. Ava appeared often, laughing with Jesse and Delilah, a picture of innocence under golden light. The moments looked pure, but behind that sheen was something colder, calculated, detached. Ava wasn't truly adopted. She wasn't family. She was a symbol, a tool, a brief character cast in a much larger performance Diddy was staging for the world, her innocence. A commodity, one he used and then erased when no longer useful. Her disappearance was abrupt, complete, as if a program had been terminated. A subroutine deleted from the master code of Diddy's narrative for a man who documented every detail of his life. Her vanishing was a rupture in the digital pattern, a hole too precise to be accidental. Only those with trained eyes like Terrence Howard noticed the silence, the absence, the anomaly. The contrast was jarring. Her joyful introduction, met with the deafening stillness that followed it, was a quiet confirmation of her role in Diddy's world, temporary, expendable, disposable. Howard had lived through Hollywood's darkest contradictions. He'd seen the highs, the self-destruction, the illusions, but nothing prepared him for what he stumbled across in the spring of 2020 behind the walls of Diddy's sprawling Holmby Hills mansion. The air was heavy with cigar smoke and whispered deals. It was a curated world where nothing was real and everything had a price. He'd been invited to what was framed as a casual gathering, but beneath the surface it was a performance Diddy's private theater filled with influencers hangers-on and a small audience that knew how to play. Their Partha Ward stood on the margins, scanning faces half engaged until Diddy entered with a stage-ready grin that didn't quite reach his eyes and pulled a little girl forward, hair like moonlight eyes wide and too trusting for the world she'd been thrust into. It was Ava Baron Combs, 11 years old, fragile luminous, introduced with a grand flourish to the digital world as Diddy's adopted daughter, a messianic tale of rescue, a heartwarming distraction from the darker headlines trailing him. Howard watched, a deep unease building in his chest. He'd seen Diddy perform countless times, but this felt different, colder, more scripted, and underneath it all, a wrongness he couldn't shake, something predatory masked in paternal charm. After the live broadcast ended, Diddy stepped into a secluded alcove near the lounge. Howard, nearby by chance, overheard the conversation. A voice, low but razor-sharp, speaking to a trusted associate. "This kid," Diddy said with a smirk, "she's just a pawn to shut down the rumors. The market needs something pure. Right now, a story to believe in, something to distract them from what's really going on." He laughed hollow, no warmth, no joy. "It's best if it looks like I'm doing something noble." "Right. The masses will eat it up." Like always, hook, line, and sinker. Howard froze, blood cold. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This wasn't strategy. This was cruelty. Diddy continued. "She's so fragile," he said with a sneer. "Just a plaything. Easy to manage. Wants to be loved just like the rest of these fame-starved nobodies. They'll do anything for a shot." Howard turned, slowly, eyes back on the room. Ava sat nearby on the floor with Jesse and Delilah, cradling a doll, smiling innocent, unaware. But now, to Howard, that smile looked different. A mask, a faint echo of something already fading. In that moment, he saw it all. The weight, the inevitability, the danger. He saw a child being used, discarded, invisible to everyone but those willing. To see past the fantasy, Diddy's voice still echoed in his head, venom wrapped in charm, contempt hidden behind designer glasses. Howard felt a sickness, a revulsion deep in his gut. He wasn't looking at a celebrity anymore. He was looking at a predator. Cold, meticulous, unrepentant, willing to sacrifice anyone, even a child, to protect the empire he'd built on illusion, and that image stayed with him. Burned in the back of his mind, a permanent scar. A warning sign that everything about Diddy's world was far darker than it appeared. The illusion of power shattered in that searing moment. Terrence Howard had seen many things in Hollywood, but nothing prepared him for the cold, calculated malice he witnessed in Diddy's words. That day, it etched itself deep into his conscience, branding him with a purpose he couldn't escape. From that moment on, he was consumed by Ava Combs' face and Diddy's contemptuous sneer. The phrase, "a plaything easy to control," rang in his ears like a curse. He couldn't turn away, not. After that, not when the truth was so brutally clear, challenging Diddy's empire. A vast machinery of wealth, fear, and silence seemed impossible, but inaction was betrayal. Howard's conscience, once quiet beneath years of surviving the system, now screamed for justice and protection for Ava and for anyone else lost in Diddy's shadow. He couldn't confront him openly, not yet, so he moved quietly, deliberately. A war in the shadows. He reached out to old contacts in the industry, discreetly planting questions, stirring doubt, gathering whispers, piecing together fractured truths. All roads led him to one key figure, Gene Deal, Diddy's former head of security. A man who had seen too much for too long. Howard approached him slowly, carefully not with accusations. But with empathy, he spoke of Ava with raw sorrow, painting the image of a child paraded, then erased her face, her silence, her sudden disappearance. "Jean," he'd said quietly in one of their secret meetings, "you were there. You saw her. She's gone now. What really happened?" The honesty struck deep, somewhere inside Jean. Something shifted behind. The scenes Howard doubled down, combing through old reports, obscure articles, rumors buried under years of media manipulation. He analyzed patterns of behavior, isolated moments that now, through Ava's disappearance, took on sinister new context. Every thread wove a larger picture, and Ava was at its center. He assembled a dossier. Detail by detail, a blueprint of deception, cross-referenced with testimony timelines and circumstantial proof, all building to one undeniable truth. This wasn't just neglect, this was a deliberate, weaponized performance, and Ava, a child, had been used, then discarded. He knew what he was risking. Diddy was powerful, ruthless, connected, but none of it mattered anymore. The image of that child, her innocence, swallowed by a machine of lies, fueled. His resolve, this wasn't vengeance, it was preservation. Truth was the only antidote. On June 10th, 2025, 9:30 a.m., the courtroom felt like a pressure chamber. Terrence Howard's testimony landed like a precision strike, every word about Ava Combs. Every detail of what he'd seen, what he'd heard, what Jean had confirmed, hung in the air like static prosecutor. Linda Chen didn't hesitate. She stepped into the silence and said clearly, "Mr. Howard's testimony is a critical data packet revealing an empire built on manipulation and exploitation." She pointed to Diddy's use of Ava as the most egregious example of that weaponized image-making, an innocent child turned into a PR asset, then abandoned without a trace. Ava Combs, she said firmly, was never truly adopted. She was never truly protected. She was a construct, a calculated distraction, a ghost, now because of the defendant's inhumanity. Diddy's lawyers objected loudly, scrambling, but the jury had already shifted. Something in their expressions had changed. The mask was gone. The performance had collapsed. Hours later, the verdict came. Judge Davies asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreperson stood. "Yes, Your Honor, guilty." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Diddy slumped eyes empty. The facade that had protected him for decades crumbled in real time. The charges: federal, sex trafficking, racketeering, sexual assault, drug distribution. The silence that followed was thick with tears and vindication. A decades-long myth had finally cracked open. Terrence Howard sat still watching Diddy being handcuffed. His expression wasn't victory. It was grief. Grief for what had been lost. For the innocence stolen for Ava. For the others still hidden in the shadows. But on this day, something irreversible had happened. The silence had been broken. The illusion pierced and an empire built. On lies began to collapse under the weight of truth.